Hi everybody, Dave with Aspen Whitetail Management. I'm going to take a day off from bow hunting, and I wanted to come out here and walk a prairie area. I have with my real good friend Pat Clark. He restores a lot of prairies. He restored this prairie you see around me. You know, a lot of people buy a piece of property, it maybe isn't a solid piece of wooded property, and that's fine. It's actually a good thing. We want to show you what a person can do with a lot of work, but it's very much worth the time and effort. What you see behind me is a 1-year prairie. We'll go into a little more depth here in the video on this, but such a crucial piece of habitat for deer and wildlife in general. And I think it sets up well for a lot of people's properties. And so I really wanted to come out here, walk this with Pat. He's got so much knowledge in the prairie end of this, and he's got, you know, over 200 species on his prairie alone. But I want to show you, though, I want to show you some of this, what we can use for habitat for whitetail properties, mixing them with red osier, dogwood, gray willow, silky willow, bunch of different varieties. We're going to go through it here with Pat here in a little bit, but super excited to shoot this video. I think a lot of you will learn a lot from this. I know I will. So enjoy the video. Good. And sprinkle in some oak trees. Yep. I mean, you get bedding, you get browse, yes. You get everything they need.
You get everything. You could literally have, this is a pretty small prairie, really. It's only 30 acres. But, you know, if I had the right terrain on a 10-acre parcel even, or even smaller, really. I did an 8 acres for a client one, for a good friend of mine, really, that we restored. And it just complemented the existing marsh and woods that he has. And the deer, found out that most of the time the deer are actually in the prairie. They're not even in the marsh or in the woods, because it's nice and dry in there. It gets them away from any kind of predation or any kind of worries with people or anything like that. So it's a great place. Here's that plant I mentioned here. This is called oxide sunflower, and the seeds have already ripened. This is usually a yellow flower every year, but they love these leaves and they'll eat them like mad. So these two kind of survived here, but they just, this is an example of a prairie plant that deer, not only just for habitat, but it's just something they'll eat. And you go out in the middle of them, the deer will literally have beds in the middle of them. And it's really interesting, because what I've found is deer will make these beds on the calm side of hills out here, depending where the wind's blowing.
Yep.
So it's really fun to go out and see, you know, where they make these beds. Anything to get 100% comfort, you know. In the wintertime, they'll make these beds so they can have access to the sun for a large majority of the day. So if you have an area that you can restore and plant these things, man, you're really helping out the deer just to get through winter and tougher times even. So
absolutely. You know, so many of my clients, you know, they'll buy a piece of property and they think that they got to buy a piece of property that's completely wooded. And it's so hard to manipulate a wooded piece of property. You know, people want food plots, people need bedding, and you know, and I tell clients, you know, a lot of people don't realize the benefits of a prairie.
Really like that oxide sunflower up by the house. There's a ton of them that grow up there, but the deer just love them. You know, they just have a field day on them all spring. They eat the plants, and they still flower out anyway, because they just grow right back anyway. But
right,
here's a great example of the two oaks that are really kind of dominant in this area of Wisconsin. You know, the one in the front there is a bur oak, and the one in the back of it is a black oak.
Sure.
So just the leaves on the bur oak are bigger, and they're just thinner on the black oak.
Yeah, they got an entirely different looking trunk. The limbs and the bark obviously,
and they're both pretty definitely fire resistant is what you know we're interested in here. Some of these plants can get pretty big. Like this is a Indian grass, but man, I've had them as high as 10 feet out here.
Wow, I mean, that's got to be all of 7.5 there.
See how big you get. And here's a example of a big blue stem. This thing can get crazy. This one here is real tall. This is actually sawtooth sunflower. These babies can get like 12 feet tall. It's right up here against this younger bur oak here, but this is a great habitat plant as well. And you commingle it with the big blue stem and stuff. This is a pretty new prairie in here. When I bought this property, this was all box elder, even some European buckthorn was here, and willows. So took a few years to cut it out of here. And then by the time I cut it out here, I found huge pieces of concrete that somebody had dumped there. So got rid of them. And then we finally got this into a prairie, but it was a really tough area to deal with. And there's deer in here all the time bedded down. They love it. You know.
But it's actually taken off and done quite well. Now, how long ago would you say you put this back in the prairie?
We slowly did parts of it because it was just in such tough condition. So this is probably about 11 years now. This prairie over here, we tried to take it a little bit easier. As you can tell, we put in more flowers over here than the grasses. Over here though, if you run your camera over here, this is a serious grass prairie here.
Yes.
You know, if you and I and people watching this thing went out, Dave, in Iowa in 1800, this is what Iowa looked like, the whole state.
Sure.
It built these incredible soils in Iowa, and this is a big blue stem here, and you can just tell from the habitat, just from the root systems of this thing, these plants will go down about 6-7 feet of root. So they're very, you know, most of the plant is actually underground in a prairie plant, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. So they can withstand these massive prairie fires because all the roots down, and it actually entices them to even grow stronger and build soil and all those sorts of things.
In years of drought, they're going to be
so the whole corn
here.
belt is really what this looked like. The whole, I mean, it kind of built our bread basket. The prairie did so, and it did some other cool things along the way. It created this great habitat for all these awesome, all the wildlife in North America, and then white-tailed deer was just a huge beneficiary of this. So
Absolutely.
it's just a great thing. Here's that switchgrass I was telling you about. That's one of the main grasses right here.
What type of switchgrass? Do you know what type you got in your prairie?
This is just the regular Wisconsin switchgrass, the genotype. When I originally found this stuff, I had to go find it along railroad tracks in Wisconsin because it was the only place that was kind of left that you knew for sure it was native Wisconsin stuff. Because I didn't want to get stuff from, you know, Missouri or something. You know, I wanted to get, you know, our Wisconsin authentic stuff. So
very nice.
Kind of give you an idea.
Yeah, so many people, you know, they hear nothing, you know, it's all cave and rock and Shawnee and and grasses like that tend to get quite a bit higher.
Yep. I just always stuck with this stuff that is native to this area because I figured it was made here. It came through evolution, so to speak, right here. So I think this is kind of where it belongs. I didn't have to bring in any kind of hybrids or anything like this. Here's a young oak trying to get through the prairie here.
Absolutely.
Kind of give you an idea. It must have been an acorn fell in there a while ago. So this is more of your flowers in here. It's getting a little late in the year, and really the only thing that's kind of showing now are asters. Really, those are called New England asters, by the way. You know, that sort of
thing. Do the deer, do they browse?
Deer will definitely browse these things, yeah.
Yep.
These bur oaks, when they were younger too, they took their beating from bucks, you know, doing their thing on these trees, but they made it through, you know. Whereas like a dogwood will just break in half.
Right, right. But boy, them deer love that dogwood.
They do.
Especially when you mix it in with a prairie and pockets.
Oh, they do.
Yeah. You can see some young red dogwood right here growing along the edge here.
Well, you can see this has already been nipped right here by a deer.
Yep. Yeah.
Kind of give you an idea right there.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what deer do though. They love this stuff because these ends are real tender.
Yep.
You know, so
it's a huge browse for whitetail, especially in the Midwest
and
here.
This is actually a native shrub here too. It's called thorny ash. And in the absence of fire, it'll literally become an invasive or kind of take over areas. We are very limited here, but deer love to buck rub this stuff. It's got actual thorns on it. It's a native, so we've trying to encourage it to survive. It doesn't do well in fires. The fires will set it back, and then they'll start coming back up. So, you know, this is kind of a plant that kind of comes and goes with fire. So.
And I think, you know, people got to watch too, you know, planting non-native species in an area because you can end up with a lot of problems with it taking over.
Well, the thing that kind of drives me crazy too is you've got an area that would be a perfect prairie, and they go in there and put a plantation of, you know, pines that belong 300 miles north of here, you know, in there. And the local stuff is what works best. And here it's really just been the oaks and the shagbark hickories and things. But there are many, many different types of shrubs though. You can, like I've had great luck with this high brush cranberry. And everything benefits from that. Deer, I mean, the migrating birds just love it. I've seen grouse up in the top parts of those trees. Pheasants will even fly up there and try to get these high brush cranberries because they're so delicious and they're just packed with protein. So they're great, and they usually last all the way through winter. So it'll help deer out when times are tough and it's 20 below and the wind's blowing out of the northwest here, and there's 3-4 foot drifts. They can get at this stuff, and it's just so beneficial for them.
People, everything is about acorns and oaks, and they're great to have.
Yeah.
But that acorn crop drops, and it drops quick,
right.
and everything is after them, and they don't last long. You want something that
That's
can.
right. And like around here, the squirrels, boy, they hide them everywhere.
Right.
This is a cool plant. If you could smell this, which you can't right now, but this is part of the mint family. It's called bee balm, is what some people call it. I call it just wild bergamot. It's just part of that family, but it benefits deer greatly. And the one thing it benefits is just pollinators. They just love this stuff. Your bumblebees, your monarch butterflies of the world, they just go crazy. This is one of those plants that's just so beneficial to many, many, many different native species. So it's just a great thing to have. So
How does that stand up to the snow, Pat?
It's really strong. Like, here's some more of this. Here's some of this right here, very sturdy. In fact, I've actually, when it grows quick enough, I've actually had birds make nests in the stems of these.
So very hardy, very sturdy.
Yep, and here's some more of that oxide sunflower. Very sturdy, very sturdy. When you look at the stem on this stuff. The only way this gets really knocked over is if you have a fire, anything naturally.
Sure.
The stuff that does get knocked over, like here's some canary grass, which I've been working hard to try to get rid of in our prairies. You can see it's already laying down.
Yes.
We had about a 50, 60 mile an hour wind that came through here about a week ago. And you can tell how the prairie did out here. And this is how canary grass did.
Good point.
So if you can get prairie in here, which I've been dumping seed in here, trying to get this to go. And out here has kind of been a problem area for us, as you can tell, with canary grass. But we're starting to see little islands of prairie kick in here just in the last couple years. So we're finally getting ahead of it. So we're trying to make about maybe 2 more acres here of deer habitat and habitat for everything. Because the canary grass really doesn't do the job. There's nothing that really eats it.
No.
And you get these wind events, and just a little bit of snow or sleet on canary grass, it just goes flat on you.
Yeah, right. Like you said, you see it. I mean, this is summer growth. It should be standing up, and it's already laying down. And if anybody's knows the Midwest and knows this canary grass, it is not a good thing to have.
It's rough. It's an invasive from Europe originally.
Yep.
My family were Germans from Europe. It was probably my family that brought it here, knowing my family. but it's a plant that just doesn't really do a lot of beneficial things for wildlife. So we want to replace that. Even if we were to take this area and start dotting in dogwood and maybe even some swamp oaks in here. So this is a lower area. It's still just so much more beneficial than just a field of canary grass. So that would be the thing to do out here. We're trying to establish some rarer, wetter species in here that are a little harder to get into some lower areas. Like big blue stem kind of belongs in some little higher areas. It'll kind of work its way in a dry year into a wet area. But this area we're trying to, and it's starting to come up. A lot of plants like obedience plant and Culver's root, which are more rare, that they're all starting to come up in here. So it's really nice to see.
So as far as a wet area, Pat, what would you suggest is for what type of prairie plants would grow
for
in
wetter,
an area
there
like
is
that?
A whole class of prairie plants that like it wetter. And one of the main grasses in that would be prairie cordgrass, which we've got that starting to work its way into this area. And prairie cordgrass is just a strong, very durable grass that'll stand up all the way through wintertime. I mean, I've had it where there's literally nothing standing out here except that, in your really bad winters. So It's been just a wonderful plant that way. I'll show you it up here. There's a big patch of it up here. So
all right.
When I bought this property, there was only 6 native species that were on it when I bought it. And that was one of them. That's how tough it is. Because the cows and horses wouldn't eat it in pastures because it's just too sharp on their tongues and mouths, so they would avoid it. So that's why I still have it.
That's why it's here.
Yep, exactly.
So as far as a deer grazing on it, they're probably not going to graze on it, but they definitely are going to bed up in it.
Down in it. This is called sneezeweed, by the way. It doesn't make you sneeze, but pioneers called it that because they used to use it as kind of a chew. They used to put it in their mouths and chew it and snuff it once in a while. So
Interesting.
yeah, one of those things. You can see the canary grass in here. This is an area that we're really trying to get a hold of it, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna put out a video here. We reclaimed about 2.5 acres of canary grass into a food plot.
Perfect.
And we're gonna do a video next year. We got about another 3 acres that we're going to kill off, and we're going to allow the popple and stuff to regenerate. We've had really good luck with it, so we're gonna show people how to do that, and it really works out great.
I'll show you in the back of my property. There's about an acre of that going through that
Perfect
popple regeneration right now.
Excellent.
Some
yeah,
are pretty big.
It really works.
It does. See, we're dealing with a shoreline here too, so we're trying to keep, you know, plants that will hold soils along shorelines too, just to stop erosion. So it's a whole nother thing here. So, but there's a couple different things that work here.
How long ago did you put your main prairie in here, Pat?
I bought this place in 1992, and so we started the prairie. I think it was, well, I started in 92, but I just did a very small amount. I didn't really know what I was doing, you know. And in 1992, nobody even knew what a prairie was, I think. So I slowly worked it in, and it, you know, I'm still. One thing, you start this process, you're never happy with it completely ever, so you're always trying to improve it, you know, and trying to like get rid of canary grass and do those sorts of things. So, but it's been kind of an ongoing thing. So for me. But
it's a real passion when you do these things, and I tell people when I go in and do client work, you know, you're going to see results, but it's a year after year process.
It is. No doubt about it. And you'll be rewarded, believe me. I mean, when I first was here, this was a cornfield basically. I mean, last fall, right before deer hunting season, I counted 23 deer out here. So, this is not, and I'm mostly surrounded by, well, a lake on the north end, but on the south end, it's all big farms. There's not a lot of habitat, but to hold 23 deer in here, and they pretty much stayed all winter.
And that's a testimony to the power of these prairies.
In our marsh, we have a nice spring hole, and they know where that is, which really helps them out too. This, by the way, is called cup plant, which is a really cool native plant. Deer benefit from it. In fact, last year I had a couple of pictures I took of a cup plant where the deer actually buck rubbed the plant, which they usually do on harder substances.
Right.
But on this plant, they didn't. It's called cup plant because of this cup right here. And in times when there's a lot of rain, that water will stay inside of that cup plant for a long time. And guess who figured out all that? The native insects and native birds. When they're thirsty, they all head for that cup plant. It's an amazing thing to see.
Cool.
It's a great plant. There's actually some willows growing in here too, Dave.
And willows are a great species around here.
They come up so quickly. Look at them out there. That's just basically 1 or 2 years of growth. You know,
and
since 2 years ago we burnt this, so I mean, this is what.
And another wet location shrub that does extremely well that the deer love too to eat on.
This area literally was canary grass. All of this 5 years ago.
So just 5 years ago.
Just 5 years ago. We've burnt it twice since then. We went in and seeded it twice. That'd have been like 4 and 5 years ago. And we put a mix in here of about 40 or 50 different species in here. And this is a result after doing battle with canary grass for many years. We finally got the prairie to kick in right here. So it took over, and we've even got some bur oaks that are coming up right there. So we'll protect those because this spring we're going to do a prairie burn on here. So we'll take the mower, the DR mower, and go around them. They are pretty fire resistant, but I just do it just to make sure we don't hurt them.
Right.
They're such a vital thing for wildlife, you know. So.
And what else do you have popping up out here, Pat? It looks like
up here is all. Here's that yellow coneflower right here.
Yep.
There's the seed. Here's that sneezeweed coming up right here.
Yep.
Can I give you an idea?
So what do we got for the shrubs
out here? This
is
is actually one thing I've been trying to get under control because this is an invasive. This is multiflora rose.
Yes.
Which is a European rose. My grandfather brought that over here. He planted that on this property because he was a huge pheasant hunter. And everybody thought this was the thing that would help pheasants get through the winter and stuff, which it really did. And here's one of the reasons why. See these little red berries right here? Pheasants love those.
Sure.
And I know deer do too. But that's red osier. Those are the seed heads actually from the red osier, or not red osier dogwood, I'm sorry, from the multiflora rose, which was what this is. So and these are all winterberry and all kinds of other plants that popped up in here. Now we had to burn this though to get some of this stuff was actually still in here. The seed, it just took a fire to regenerate the seed, which was pretty cool. So we actually found some plants that had no idea they would be there, and they actually ended up showing up. It was just awesome. I mentioned, Dave, here's that one of those plants that when I bought this property, there were 6 native species here. This is actually one that was. This is that prairie cordgrass, very deep, 5-6 foot root systems. Cows didn't eat it because this is very sharp. These leaves, they didn't like it.
It is a very tough plant from what I know. When you try to cut it, it's almost like trying to go through a rope.
It is, and even the seeds are kind of sharp and hard to deal with, you know. So I just picked some for a friend of mine who needed some of these. So, but this is an area right in here. This is a really nice, thick of area. But this is a great plant to grow in areas that nothing else will grow. Because it's so wet. This is always a wet area. It's almost like there's a little bit of a spring here or something going on. But this area right here, this was all canary grass out here, and then there was this spot of this prairie cordgrass to give you an idea how tough this stuff is. So it was able to take on the prairie cordgrass and succeed. But you got to realize, canary grass root systems are only down 2-3 inches at the most. This thing's down 5-6 feet. So it kind of give you an idea. Makes it through droughts like nothing, these plants. So.
You bet. Another good reason to put it in.
Yep. It just, again, complements the whole everything. It's just really great thing for deer.